Hi all! Before we get started, a quick heads up about this episode with Tom Dumoulin. The chat with Tom was recorded before the news came out that his teammate Steven Kruijswijk will not be able to participate in this year's Tour de France, and before Team Ineos made its team announcement. So, unfortunately, we did not get a chance to discuss both matters on the podcast. Enjoy the show! This is Rob Pauw, and today in Turbo Talks we're talking to Tom Dumoulin of Team Jumbo-Visma about the Tour de France. And welcome back to the Turbo Talks podcast. The cycling season is well and truly on the way, and the sport's biggest stars are already firing on all cylinders, or they are desperately trying to find their top form as soon as possible. Because in 1.5 weeks it is the start of the biggest race of the year, the 2020 Tour de France. And if the last week of racing showed anything, then it is that our guest for today's podcast will be lining up as one of the favorites. He went 420 days without racing, but after only 8 race days back in the peloton, it looks like he never left the front ranks. It's an honor to have him on the show. Welcome Tom Dumoulin of Team Jumbo-Visma. Welcome Tom, how are you?
Hi. Good. Yeah, I'm good. At the moment, I'm in Tignes at altitude. So I just did the Dauphiné, and now we're here for the last preparations for the Tour de France.
How is the recovery going after that really tough Dauphiné?
It's now 3 days ago, and I have not been training much yet. So I've just been recovering, and we will start some training as soon as I'm recovered. But
it's been 8 really hard days on the bike for you. Like we said, you had a long absence. What was the feeling of those 8 race days in Tour de l'Ain and the Dauphiné that you kind of like missed most in that whole period?
I think just having the adrenaline of racing, and also being on the road with a team. It's like a little bit of a gypsy circus going on, and it's special to be part of. So I missed it. I definitely missed it.
We heard the clock ringing in the background, 9 o'clock on the Wednesday morning, 1.5 weeks out from the Tour de France. Obviously, from the Dauphiné, some really positive signs, but how are your teammates? Do you know anything about that, about how Steven Kruijswijk is going and Primoz?
No, not really, actually. I saw them Sunday. And then, of course, Stevie had to go home instead of going to Tignes, which was a bummer for him. Primoz is here in Tignes, but I have my own apartment with my family at the moment. So we had the recovery days a little bit separated. So I don't really know, but we go on the bike together today. So then I will hear how it's going on.
So at least you'll be seeing a Primoz today, and the fact that he'll be back on the bike is we'll take that as a good sign. And for Steven, bit unfortunate, obviously. How is that going to change things for you guys as a team towards the Tour de France in the lead up?
Well, it's not ideal, of course. We would have liked to have the ideal preparation and to do Dauphiné, end it with a good feeling, and then work on the last details here at altitude camp. Well, that's not going to happen for Stevie, at least. So it's not ideal, but I hope once we're at the start line at the Tour de France, we will all 3 be again very ready for it. But at the moment, I don't really know if that's going to be possible, but we are still with good hopes.
And if you then look around in the peloton, because there's been a number of crashes, people having back problems, etc., it seems like you are the only one of all the top favorites who is fully healthy at the moment.
It almost seems like it. I didn't have any big major problems in the races. Of course, it was strange to be back, and also I had some days I didn't feel so great. And now also my recovery takes a bit more time than it would normally do, I think. But I hope that these races will add another not a level to my shape, and then I hope to be ready before the Tour de France.
And how is your level now compared to, let's say, when you look back at maybe 2018, where you're doing like the double Giro Tour, or maybe even 2017 when you won the Giro? How is your level compared? What do the numbers say?
2017-18, I was definitely slightly better than I'm at the moment, but it can quickly change. I mean, it was also not expected that I would be back at that level immediately at the first races. So I definitely needed those races to step up, and now it's just recovering, and hopefully those races will do the job in getting my shape to another level, and that's something we hope for and that we also expect, but that's something you cannot really guarantee.
And you mentioned earlier now, like these days, you're still at altitude, and now in between the periods till the Tour de France start, you're still working on this last details. Is that just physically, or is that also preparation in doing recons or getting more to know about the course, etc.? What does that look like, those final details?
Actually, the most important detail is just to get another altitude thing going on for another week, like a little... in Dutch, we say prikkel. I don't know the English word.
Like the incentive, like a stimulus.
Yeah, stimulus, exactly. Another altitude stimulus, which is good for to repeat after a long altitude camp in July. And then that is the most important thing. And for the rest, we'll also do another recon of the stage to Col de la Loze. But we did that already at the last camp, so it's nothing new, but it's good to refresh.
And when you mentioned like that stimulus from altitude, is that different for you, how that works out, than it does for maybe someone like Primoz? Do you respond differently to that? And how come riders respond differently to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think all riders respond slightly different, but in my team now, I didn't see so much. I mean, we responded all quite the same and all quite well on the last camp. So and we also did a little bit of the similar amount of work. So yeah, I think everybody is unique, but also all the general laws of physics count for everybody slightly the same also. So I think we worked hard and we did the right work at the last camp, and it worked out for each one of us, and I hope it will be the same after this camp before the Tour de France.
It's actually a pretty scary thought, because I think when you said it worked out pretty well, it's maybe the cycling understatement of the year so far. By the way, you guys are riding as a team with victories everywhere, whether it's in Italy or France. Was that sort of like surprising, and how impressed are you by the team at the moment?
I'm really impressed. Yeah, I expected us to be good in the first races because we all trained hard and we trained all very methodically. And the team really pushed us hard to work actually hard during lockdown, and we all did. And I saw the level in July was really high, but to be this good and to be dominating races like we did the past couple of weeks, that is something I didn't really expect.
And what's the feeling then on the bike in the race when you see it happening, and when you're witnessing it from the front row that you're that dominant?
That's a really nice feeling. I mean, it's really nice to be part of such a strong team. It's something I never experienced before. I was in a strong team before, but not this strong, not this dominant. And it's cool.
And then when in the race, when you compare it, when you see other competitors maybe struggling, maybe Ineos wasn't as strong as you thought it would be. How do you look at that towards the Tour de France? What kind of improvements can other teams still make to close that gap towards you guys? Is that still possible?
Well, normally I would say no. If you're not at the level now, in Dauphiné 2 weeks before, then I don't expect them to be suddenly really ready in the Tour de France, but never say never. That's something I cannot look into their cards, of course. But it's definitely we are definitely a step ahead of them. That's for sure.
And a lot of people, obviously the fans watching, maybe commentators, everyone was talking about like the battle between you guys and Ineos. Did it feel like a battle in the race as well? Did it feel like some, maybe even like mental games were being played in the peloton between you guys, or?
Nah, not really. Maybe a little bit in Tour de l'Ain, because that was a race that it was really us against Ineos. But in Dauphiné, so many strong contenders competed in that race that it was really not Ineos against Jumbo-Visma or something like that.
Do you guys enjoy it as a team, that bit of competition, or the bit of like sort of like pressure that's then being sort of like put onto you by the general public, or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's we also see what Sky and Ineos did the last couple of years, and that they won the Tour de France every year, and we really feel a bit like we are their main contenders this year, and that's of course a nice feeling, and it gives us motivation and energy.
And when you look ahead to this Tour de France, because the start of the Tour de France immediately is going to be full on. It's not just a couple of flat stages first. Immediately there could be time caps coming up. Is that something that you pay extra attention to, those first couple of stages in your preparation?
No, not really. I think the weight of the race and the biggest gaps will still be made in the third week. Which is really hard, and of course this Tour de France is hard from the beginning, but and it's a case of not losing too much time in that first half of the Tour de France, but it's also not if you're in good shape, then you're not going to lose minutes there, maybe seconds, and in the last week it will be about way more than seconds. But of course, I mean, I don't like to lose a few seconds in the first week, but if it's like that, it's more important to be good in the third week still, even with the hard start.
And how much does it help when you're seeing, like in the Dauphiné, you're already going up the Madeleine, and in the Tour de l'Ain, you have that finale to the Grand Colombier that you already do. Does that help in the preparation to know what to expect, or is it sort of like a reminder what to expect for what's to come in the Tour?
Definitely. Yeah. It's always good to know the stages a little bit, to know the climbs. You can never know all of them, and it's maybe also not necessary, but it's nice to know most of them. Yeah.
What do you pay attention to in doing those recons of those climbs, or maybe trying to memorize stuff of it?
Just where it's steep, where it flattens out. If you know it's good, if you're hurting and you're struggling, and you know it's just steep for another kilometer, you might hang on. You might fight on to get to the flatter part. But if you don't know that it's flattening after 1 kilometer, you would maybe go your own pace already. Stuff like that. I mean, it's tactical choices that you also make on a climb, and it's good to know. It's good to know the climb.
Do you also at that point, maybe when it's get really tough, and you mentioned like there's 1K to go, what's the mental game that's going on inside of your head? Do you have some certain self-talk to keep you positive at that moment, or how does that work in your head?
Yeah, definitely. I always try to remind myself that I just need to give everything to the line, everything that I have, and that I only drop if it's really not possible anymore. And that we'll draw conclusions after the finish.
And you mentioned for that Tour de France, that third week, the one that's going to be crucial. And do you then in particular mean that final time trial up to Planche de Belleville?
That's also, normally it's going to be a crucial stage. Of course, and nobody knows what the standings in the GC are by then. Maybe it's not crucial at all, and the leader is 4 minutes ahead. But normally it's going to be definitely a crucial day. And it's something that I, of course, really enjoy and like that day.
What kind of time differences are still possible to disappear or to make up on a day like that at the end of a 3-week tour and then that time trial?
If you're talking between a good time trialing GC rider having a good day and a bad time trialing GC rider having a bad day, it could mean 2-3 minutes definitely. Yeah.
So if you are 3 minutes behind, let's say randomly Mikel Landa on that Saturday, then Mikel Landa's got a really big problem.
No, not necessarily. Normally not, but if he's really tired and I'm really feeling great at that day, then it could still be close. Yes, I think.
And you guys already did a recon of that time trial. Is it something that you might even consider, some people did in the World Championship in Norway, to do a bike swap, to change bikes on the bottom of the climb?
There could be an option, yeah.
Okay, so you have already thought about that.
Yeah, we definitely thought about it, and I think everyone thought, and some will change, some not. I know my decision, but I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, I didn't expect it to, but at least it was interesting to hear your thoughts on it anyway. So in these 2 weeks, I think you're kind of known for being a master at peaking at the right time and kind of knowing what to do in those weeks in between, like you did in between the Giro and the Tour as well. Is that something that a secret for you personal? Is that something that you discuss with the team as well to know what works for you best? Or how did you go about it this time, maybe in a new environment?
Actually, I'm having a lot of talks always with my trainer, Mathieu Heijboer, and he's the one making the training schedule and also having most of the knowledge about it. And I also have my feeling, of course. That's things that I still need to listen to my body. That worked in the past. Definitely worked in the past. I was, like you said, most of the times that I wanted to be good, I was good. And I hope it will work out again this year.
Okay, we'll trust you on that then, and hopefully that will happen. I want to move on to the Turbo Talks fan question. We always have on the podcast the fan questions coming in for our guest. And obviously with a guest like yourself, a lot of questions coming in via our Tacx and Garmin social channels. And we got a question coming in from @CyclingData, and he wanted to know who's going to be Jumbo's director sportief in the Tour, and how are your experiences with persons?
It's actually always 3 or even 4 directeurs sportifs that we have in the Tour de France. But the first sports director is going to be Grisha Nierman. He was also a sports director in Tour de l'Ain and Dauphiné. And second is going to be Arthur van Dongen, who was also there in Tour de l'Ain and Dauphiné as second sports director. So he's driving second car then, and he's making the logistics plan. And Grisha Nierman is going to be our main coach at that race, and also making the tactical plan and communicating with us most of the time. And then also Marijn Zeeman will be there, and Frans Maassen will be there.
And for you, being in a new environment and Grisha being there in Tour de l'Ain and Dauphiné, is that sort of enough time to get used to each other, or what to expect from him?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It was valuable races that we did together with the tour team and also with the tour sports directors and everything. It was good to, because of Corona, we didn't really race together. So that was really necessary, and I really enjoyed it. And I really liked it. And Grisha is really, somebody. It's just. I found out already in those two races that he's an amazing sports director. So that's definitely very very valuable.
And what are the things that, like a sports director, what sets him apart already that you notice that he's really good at it?
For sure, preparation. So Grisha always knows the parcours and everything around it by head, and also communicating with us. He's really good at that. And during the race, we just get information all the time through our radio about what's coming up, about how long the climbs are, where the hard parts of the climb are, how the downhill is it tricky or is it pretty straightforward, things like that, where we have guys standing with bottles on the side of the road to take that, and it's all little things added up into making a change at the end.
Okay, cool info. Before I'm going to wrap it up, I want to do a couple of rapid fire questions. So just short questions and just for you a short answer. Are you up for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. If you have to choose between the Alps or the Pyrenees?
Alps.
That came out quickly.
Yeah.
Is that because, why is that?
I just like the Alps better than the Pyrenees. I'm not really a fan of the Pyrenees.
Okay, there's not a lot of Pyrenees in this tour, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Probably then. Okay, then maybe a local one. Let's say after this tour and after this season is a bit of off-season, what would you prefer to get as a snack? Would you go for zuurvlees or rijstevlei from your local bakery, Smets?
Rijstevlei.
Okay. For the people not familiar with Dutch language, that's a sort of like a rice pudding cake, right?
Yeah. And zuurvlees is like it's like meat which has been cooked really long in vinegar and sugar. Actually, it sounds disgusting, but it's not. It's nice.
Okay. What is the most weight that you've gained in an off season? Or maybe in that time of absence?
Just 2 kilos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't gain in the winter.
Okay, and what's race weight?
Around 70.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last one, because obviously with the Tour de France coming up, there's a lot of fantasy games going on and people selecting riders. Do you have one hot tip for everyone selecting their tour squads for which rider to include in their fantasy team?
Primoz Roglic, but that's not really a hot tip, I think. No, I thought Guillaume Martin was doing pretty well in Dauphiné, much better than in the past.
Okay, yeah, you definitely made an impression. Ended up on the podium even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, good pick. People, Guillaume Martin. All right, Tom, we're going to leave you to it. Get you some more recovery and rest in before you pick up that final bit of training ahead of the Tour de France. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
It's much appreciated. And people who have been listening, thank you all for tuning in again. And you know the drill. Subscribe, rate and review this podcast. And as always, make sure you never stop cycling. This was Rob Bouw with Tom Dumoulin of Team Jumbo-Visma. Stay tuned for the next Turbo Talks.